Imagine two men. One spent his life sweeping floors. The other walked the marble corridors of Wall Street, armed with a Harvard MBA and access to the most powerful bankers in the world. Now imagine the janitor dies with more money than the banker could dream of. And the banker dies bankrupt. This isn't a parable, it's the true story of Ronald Read and Richard Fosconi, and it hides a truth about money that could change your life forever. Ronald Read was born in rural Vermont, the first in his family to finish high school. He hitchhiked to class every single day. For 25 years, he fixed cars at a gas station. For 17 more, he swept floors at J.C. Penney. He lived in the same modest two-bedroom home for decades, chopped his own firewood, and practiced one habit above all others: patience. When Ronald died in 2014, at the age of 92, his will shocked everyone. He left $2 million to his stepchildren and $6 million to his local library and hospital, an $8 million fortune. Built quietly, out of sight, there was no lottery win, no inheritance. Ronald saved what little he could, invested in reliable companies, and waited. Decades of compounding did the rest. Richard Fosconi's story could not be more different. He was Harvard educated, a former vice chairman at Merrill Lynch, and retired in his 40s to focus on philanthropy. He lived in an 18,000 square foot mansion with 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators, and 7 garages. The upkeep alone cost $90,000 a month. But when the financial crisis of 2008 hit, his fortune collapsed. Debt, illiquid assets, and falling markets pushed him into bankruptcy. First, his Palm Beach home was foreclosed on. Then the Greenwich mansion followed. By 2014, just months before Ronald Read's quiet fortune made headlines, Fosconi's estate sold for a fraction of its value. How could a janitor with no financial education end up wealthier than a Wall Street veteran? The answer is simple. Doing well with money is less about what you know and more about how you behave. And behavior is shaped not by intelligence, but by patience, discipline, and the ability to avoid ruin. The most important skill in building wealth is one anyone can learn. And in the next part of this series, we'll uncover the invisible forces of luck and risk, and how they quietly shape your financial destiny. Bill Gates once said, "If there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft." Lakeside was a small private school in Seattle. In 1968, it became one of the only high schools in the world to have a computer. Not a toy, not a calculator. A time-sharing terminal linked to a mainframe. 13-year-old Bill Gates spent countless late nights experimenting on that machine with his friend Paul Allen. They became obsessed. They weren't just learning computers, they were living them, years before the rest of the world caught on. Now here's the math. In 1968, there were roughly 300 million high school-age students in the world. Only about 300 of them attended the one school with the foresight, resources, and sheer luck to give them hands-on access to such a machine. Gates happened to be one of them. That's 1 in a million luck. But the story isn't complete without Kent Evans. Gates and Evans were best friends and equal in talent. They shared the same ambitions, dreamed of building companies together, and were already solving complex problems beyond their age. Gates believed they would have been lifelong partners. Then, before graduation, Kent Evans died in a mountaineering accident. The odds of such a tragedy at that age were also about 1 in a million. Gates experienced rare luck. Evans experienced rare risk. Luck and risk are siblings. They are both the reality that forces beyond our control shape every outcome in life. For every successful story we admire, there are countless others with the same skill, the same drive, but a different roll of the dice. This is why judging success or failure is dangerous. We see someone succeed and assume it's all skill. We see someone fail and assume it's all mistakes. But in truth, the line between bold and reckless, genius and disaster can be paper thin, and often only visible in hindsight. When you give luck and risk the respect they deserve, you realize it's never as good or as bad as it seems. Success can turn in an instant, and failure can reverse just as quickly. The trick is to stay in the game long enough for the odds to fall in your favor. At a party thrown by a billionaire, the author Joseph Heller was told that their host had made more money in a single day than Heller had earned from his famous novel Catch-22 in his entire life. Heller replied, "Yes, but I have something he will never have: enough." It's a simple idea, and yet, for some of the wealthiest people in history, it's the one thing they could never grasp. Take Rajat Gupta. Born in Kolkata, orphaned as a teenager, he rose from nothing to become CEO of McKinsey & Company, one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the world. By 2008, he was worth over $100 million. He could have lived a life of comfort and freedom. But Gupta wanted more, not millions, billions. As a board member of Goldman Sachs, he learned of Warren Buffett's plan to invest $5 billion into the bank during the financial crisis. 16 seconds after the call ended, Gupta phoned a hedge fund manager with the inside information. The trade made quick profits, but it was also insider trading. Gupta went to prison, his career and reputation destroyed. Then there's Bernie Madoff. Before becoming the most notorious Ponzi schemer of all time, he was already wildly successful. His legitimate market-making business earned tens of millions a year. He had wealth, power, and respect. But it wasn't enough. His fraud eventually unraveled, costing investors billions and earning him a life sentence. These men didn't risk it all because they were desperate. They risked it because they couldn't stop moving the goalpost. That's the real danger, when having more becomes more important than keeping what you already have. Modern capitalism is brilliant at creating wealth, and even better at creating envy. The ceiling of comparison is infinite. No matter how high you climb, there's always someone above you. The only way to win is to step off the ladder entirely and decide that what you have is enough. Enough doesn't mean settling. It means protecting the things that can't be replaced. Your reputation, your freedom, your relationships. Lose those and no amount of money will make you whole again. In the next part, we'll uncover the real secret to building extraordinary wealth. Not by chasing the highest returns, but by mastering the quiet power of time and compounding. When people talk about Warren Buffett's success, they focus on his investment skill. And yes, he is a phenomenal investor. But the real secret isn't just how well he invests. It's how long he's been investing. Buffett began seriously investing at age 10. By 30, he was worth $1 million, about $9 million in today's money. He's maintained an average return of around 22% a year for decades. But here's what most people miss. Over 99% of his net worth came after his 50th birthday. If Buffett had started investing later in life, say in his 30s, and retired at 60, he wouldn't be worth billions. He'd have around $12 million. Impressive, yes, but nowhere near $84 billion. That's the power of compounding. Small gains, repeated for a very long time, create results that look like magic. And yet, because our brains think linearly, compounding feels unnatural. We expect progress to be steady. In reality, it explodes in the later years. Think about an ice age. It doesn't start with a brutal winter. It starts when one summer is just cool enough that last year's snow doesn't fully melt. That small change lets more snow build the next year, and more the year after. Eventually, you get miles of ice covering continents. Wealth works the same way. The first few years feel slow. The middle years feel encouraging. And then, if you can just keep going without losing what you've built, the growth becomes almost unstoppable. This is why the best investors aren't necessarily the ones with the highest returns. They're the ones who can stay consistent the longest. Big wins are exciting, but if you can't hold on to them, they don't matter. The goal isn't to get rich fast. It's to get reasonably rich and stay that way for as many decades as possible. Time turns reasonable into extraordinary. Let's explore the single greatest challenge to staying wealthy and why most fortunes vanish because of one thing: failing to survive. Getting wealthy versus staying wealthy. There are countless ways to get wealthy, but there's only one way to stay wealthy: a mix of frugality and paranoia. Jesse Livermore was the greatest stock trader of his generation. By 1929, he was a legend. And when the market crashed that year, wiping out fortunes everywhere, Livermore made the trade of his life. He'd been betting stocks would fall. In a single week, he made the equivalent of $3 billion today. He was on top of the world, but the same risk-taking that built his fortune eventually destroyed it. Livermore lost everything, rebuilt it, and lost it all again. By the end, the man who once owned Wall Street died broke. Contrast that with Warren Buffett, who often says the number one rule of investing is don't lose money. And the number two rule? Don't forget rule number one. Buffett knows the game isn't about making a killing. It's about not getting killed. Getting rich requires taking risks, being optimistic, and putting yourself out there. Staying rich requires almost the opposite: humility, fear, and a constant awareness that the world can change overnight. It's the difference between offense and defense. Offense gets you ahead. Defense keeps you in the game. You can be wrong half the time and still build a fortune if you make sure no single mistake can wipe you out. Room for error, what some call margin of safety, isn't just for cautious people. It's the survival strategy of every long-term winner. Whether it's keeping extra cash, carrying less debt, or refusing to bet everything on one idea, the goal is simple: survive long enough for the odds to work in your favor. The irony is that survival doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't make headlines, but it's the reason most quiet fortunes are built quietly and stay that way. In the final part of this series, we'll tie everything together, revealing why the greatest financial skill isn't chasing more, but protecting enough and letting time do the rest. All together now. If there's one lesson that runs through every story you've heard so far, it's this: wealth is not just about numbers. It's about behavior. Ronald Read showed that patience and discipline can turn modest savings into millions. Richard Fosconi showed how overconfidence can turn millions into nothing. Bill Gates proved how rare luck can open doors the rest of us can't see. Kent Evans proved how rare risk can close them just as fast. Rajat Gupta and Bernie Madoff showed that never enough can destroy everything you've worked for. Warren Buffett showed that extraordinary results come not from the highest returns, but from time and survival. These lessons don't just apply to investing. They apply to every decision involving risk, reward, and uncertainty. The goal is not to be the smartest person in the room. It's to avoid the mistakes that end the game before it's over. The truth is, most financial success comes down to a few simple habits. Save consistently. Avoid unnecessary risks. Give compounding as many years as you possibly can. Know when you have enough. Wealth, at its core, is what you don't see. The cars you didn't buy, the upgrades you didn't chase, the risks you didn't take. Freedom, security, and peace of mind are the real returns on your investments. So here's the question you have to answer for yourself. Will you spend your life chasing the next big win, or will you build something that lasts? Because in the end, the most powerful financial skill isn't chasing more. It's protecting what matters, for as long as it takes, until time turns enough into extraordinary. The most important skill in building wealth is one anyone can learn, and that's just the beginning. Luck and risk are siblings. They're the unseen hands shaping every win and every loss, and they're why the game is never as good or as bad as it seems. If you want more stories that change the way you think about money, success, and survival, subscribe now. And if you've been here with me until the very end, type "in the game" in the comments, so I know you're one of the few who finishes what they start. Much of what you've heard in this video is inspired by The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, a book I highly recommend if you want to explore these ideas in even greater depth.